informed voter. Visit afaaction.net to get the AFA Action Voter Guide.
Democrats still hold a very big lead for control of Congress. 8 points now, 50-42. President Trump's strike in the face of a nightmare news week demonstrates that his voters remain far more loyal than his close associates do.
Last week was a tidal wave of bad news for this presidency, and his approval ratings stayed the same.
But 43% is both a very high number when you realize that many people are so deluded as to believe this guy's a good president.
The president is in very good shape. You cannot impeach a president on events that occurred before he was president.
He and Comey kind of work as this tag team. Comey tags in, Mueller tags out. It's the revolving door. It's cashing in on public service.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy and welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, amiable, effervescent, as always. And the program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. And you are listening to the Daytona 500 of conservative talk radio, the fastest 60 minutes in conservative talk radio. Oh, fastest 60 minutes in American media. Ultra 4K, more content per cubic inch of air than any other place on your radio dial. At least that is our goal. Now, in our reading, I want to talk about where we are at. It's taking us, again, into the minor prophets. Again, these guys aren't minor because they're less talented or less gifted than the major prophets. It's just that their books are shorter. God did not reveal as much material to them as he did to Jeremiah and the Isaiahs and the Daniels and so forth. But it's still quality stuff. Every word is a word from God. Now, we are in the book of Habakkuk here, and a couple of things just to give you the setting for what we're going to concentrate on. This is a pronouncement of God's judgment on the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans are the Babylonians, another term for the Babylonian people. God has raised them up to pass judgment, to enact his punishment or his discipline on Assyria, because Assyria had been assigned by God with the task of punishing Israel, the northern kingdom, but they went too far. They were too brutal. They were too savage, and God says, okay, I'm going to have to punish you. I'm going to have to punish you by bringing against you the Babylonians, who will defeat you, and they did in 612 BC. And I've raised up Babylon to discipline the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom. But we go on to find out that they're going to exceed the limits that God set for them. They're going to go too far. They're going to inflict too much pain beyond the limits that God had set. So God says, I'm going to have to raise up somebody by the name of Cyrus to come in and discipline you. And that's kind of the woe against the Chaldeans, is what occupies verses 6 through 20 of chapter 2. And he explains why you have plundered many nations. All the remnant of people shall plunder you for the blood of man and violence to the earth, the cities and all who dwell in them. So in other words, it's going to be justice is going to come to Babylon. They will receive in full measure the same measure they dished out. Remember, Jesus said, by the measure that you use, it shall be measured to you. That's true for people, and it's true for nations. They had dispensed a harsh measure. They'd measured out a harsh measure, and a harsh measure was going to be dispensed to them. Now, in the midst of this, Habakkuk speaking to the people of faith, the community of faith, and he drops right in the middle of this terrific little statement in verse 14, Habakkuk 2:14, in the middle of all of this woe, woe in verse 12, and then woe again in verse 15, right in the middle, this nugget in verse 14, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Let me reread that, because that's just a great statement. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Now, that's a promise from God, and he's going to fulfill that promise. One day we can be a part of that promise being fulfilled. And one of the things I want to suggest to you is maybe you use this, I do, on occasion, as a visual when I pray. Now, I'm not talking about imagining things and they come true, but as I pray and I'm asking God for things, this is a visual that I can use to show to God in my mind what I hope he will do. One of the things I do just about every day is I pray for my neighborhood. I've got a bunch, all the homes in our neighborhood, the subdivision, they're basically off of one main street that goes all the way down to kind of an artery street that runs by our neighborhood. And so I just pray that God's presence will fill each one of those homes. And I use a little acronym called BLESS. I've used this for a long time. I don't know where I got it in the first place, but the BLESS stands for body. The L stands for labor. The E stands for emotional life. The S, first S, stands for social life, that's relationships. And the last S stands for spiritual life. So what I do is I pray that God will release his Spirit into each home, and I just kind of picture the knowledge of the glory of the Lord kind of infiltrating each house, infiltrating each home, and slowly filling that place up until in God's time, every cubic inch of that home, every home in my subdivision, all the way from my home all the way down to Lawndale, will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the seas. And so I will pray, God, would you please bless their bodies, their physical health. Bless their labor, the work of their hands. Bless their emotional life. They'd be filled with love, joy, and peace. Bless their social life. May every relationship between husband and wife, parent and child, know your blessing, and may you bless their spiritual life. Draw each of them into a personal relationship with you and enrich them. And then I move out from there. I pray for the city of Tupelo and its mayor. I pray for Mayor Shelton and the city of Tupelo. I pray for Governor Bryant and the state of Mississippi. I pray for President Trump and the United States of America. And again, visualize my prayers, asking him in response to my prayers to release a little bit of his blessing, a little bit of the glory of the Lord into those places. And as other people pray and contribute their prayers, more and more things are dumped into those places. God feeds his presence into those places, and the prayer in time is that the earth will be covered with his glory as the waters cover the seas. Now, one of the things he says in verse 20, he's talking about these idols that are the creation of man's hands. They cannot do anything. They can't speak. They can't hear. They can't listen. He says, but in verse 20, the Lord is in his holy temple. Listen to this. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Literally, let all the earth hush before him. You know, sometimes you be in a relationship with somebody and you can't, after a while you realize you can't even get a word in edgewise. They just love to talk. They love to hear themselves talk. They never ask about you, never ask how you're doing. They just want to talk. And, you know, it gets kind of tiresome to try to deal with somebody like that. Well, you know, sometimes we can even be like that with God. All we do is talk to him. All we do is ask him for things. And here's the prophet saying, look, what you need to do some of the time is just keep silent before him. Just sit before him in silence. Open his word so he can speak to you through his word. And just with your Bible open, just sit quietly in his presence, reflect on his word, and allow him to speak to you. Well, let's take these things to the Lord in prayer. Lord God, I pray this day for my family. I pray for the listening audience of Focal Point, every man, woman, and child within the sound of my voice. Pray this day for our elected officials, including our president, President Trump. And I pray that you will produce in us a spirit of honesty and integrity and fairness in all our interactions with others. Grant us a spirit of self-control, that we may never be drunk with wine, but instead be always filled with your Spirit. May we build others up and never tear them down. I pray that we may be Christ-like examples for others in our community to imitate. Please protect us from those who shed man's blood Purge our land of idolatry and trust in things that are the work of our hands. May we rest in you and your knowledge. Amen.
Here's Dr. Ben Witherington from the American Family Studios documentary, The God Who Speaks.
Without the Jesus of history, there is no Jesus of faith. The assumption that there is a non-theological, non-divine, non-miraculous Jesus somewhere to be found at the bottom of the well of history is a myth, because as far back as we can go into the Jesus tradition, he's still always seen as the Son of Man and the Son of God. He's still always seen as someone who performed miracles. He's not just talking head, and you have to deal with the passion narrative. You can't come up with a Jesus that you sort of excise the passion narrative from the story. There was no such Jesus.
Visit thegodwhospeaks.org.
Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Italian actress Asia Argento was among the first of dozens of women who accused vile movie producer Harvey Weinstein of sexual assault. She gave an impassioned speech at the 2018 Cannes Film Festival denouncing Weinstein and those who enabled his predatory behavior by remaining silent. According to the New York Times reporting, Argento perhaps should have rebuked herself, since she was sued for sexually abusing a teenage boy actor. According to the Times, Argento paid $380,000 to settle that lawsuit. The filth Hollywood puts on the screen is a reflection of the filth they live.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Happy to have you in the conversation. And here we go. The flag. What color flag do they drop at the beginning of a race?
Green.
Green.
Yeah.
Okay, the green flag has just been dropped. And then what's the flag before the last lap?
The white.
The white flag.
Well, it depends on if it's NASCAR or Formula One. I think there's different flags, but generally it's white.
Okay, so we're going NASCAR here. So
okay.
Green flag starts the race. White flag, 1 lap to go. And then checkered flag means
you win.
You win.
And the yellow flag is not going to go out because there is no caution.
No caution in this program. There's no slowing down. There ain't no stopping. I was going to say you get in our way and we'll run right over you. And then I said, that's not probably something I ought to be talking like that.
No. So you won't.
Yeah. So we'll just leave the caution flag in the closet. So anyway, let's rock and roll. I've got a column up. I don't know, Jeff, if you could see and if it's there.
I will.
And the title of the column, which I encourage you to read, is Legalizing Pot a Good Idea? There have been 9 states in the United States that have legalized pot. It's up at afa.net. 9 states and the District of Columbia have legalized pot in the United States for recreational use. 29 states have legalized it for medicinal use, but that's just a fig leaf. That's just a thin cover for recreational use. Guys will go to doctors. Everybody finds out which doctors will write him a prescription. You go to him with the malady of your choice. He will prescribe pot for you. That's the best thing that'll help with the symptoms. And so you go and get it filled in the local medical dispensary. So just a thin cover for the vast majority of people for the recreational use of pot. So the question is this a good idea? This trend to legalize pot, is it a good idea or not? And you can read the column to get some of my thoughts. But it's interesting to note that last year, 14% of Americans, of all Americans, smoke pot. Now, it's interesting, there is a difference in the places where pot is legal and where it's not. In places where pot is legal, 20% of the people use pot. In places where it is illegal, only 12% did. So the law does have an effect. They say there's an old expression, the law is a teacher. It kind of points you in the direction of good behavior. Doesn't always do it anymore because our laws become so corrupted. We've been reading about that in Habakkuk. But the law is a teacher, and so the law says, look, there's a punishment for using pot. So people say, well, must be something wrong with it, because there's a basic level of trust that people have that our legislators are going to try to use logic and evidence and so forth in making their laws. The greatest use of pot is among young people ages 18 to 34. And while 10% of adults get addicted to marijuana, 17% of Americans under the age of 20, once they start, they can't stop. They get addicted to marijuana. You know, there's even in California, there's a bill right now in front of the Assembly to allow students to bring medical pot to school. Wow, now, it can't be in a form you smoke. It's got to be in some kind of edible form. But can you imagine that? I mean, students that have this, they're going to be selling it under the table to their classmates, splitting it up and selling a cut to their classmates. And won't be long before the school will just have to wink at recreational use of marijuana. So that's the trend lines. But, you know, we've mentioned this before, but Dr. Michael Lynch, he is the medical director of the Pittsburgh Poison Center of the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And he says, quote, early use of marijuana is associated with more negative effects on brain and cognitive development. So when people say marijuana rots your brain, it is scientifically and medically proven to be true. So your intelligence can be affected, decision-making capacity can be affected. There are psychological effects, there are psychiatric effects as well. And part of the severity of the effects is because of the turbocharged THC. THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. It's been turbocharged in our day. So the marijuana that is smoked today is not your father's marijuana, not even the marijuana you smoked in the football stands in college. It's turbocharged. And some of the ingredients or some of the effects of this can cause agitation typically, but it also has the potential to cause anxiety and psychotic effects, including schizophrenia, can cause seizures in some users. It's even been found in breast milk, by the way, so a caution to nursing moms. They have not determined all of the effect on nursing children, but that's a means of delivery into tiny little bodies. You want to be on your alert.
Yeah, the study that just came out here recently shows that they're finding THC in breast milk even 6 days after use.
All right, so it'd be a good idea for nursing moms to stay off of it, along with everybody else in the country. And remember, the New Testament, Paul says, do not be drunk with wine, by which he's referring to any intoxicating beverage, any mood-altering or mind-altering substance. You don't want to use it. You don't want to get high on it. Don't be drunk on wine. It says you can drink wine, just don't get drunk on wine. Drinking is not a problem, but drunkenness always is. And you use pot. The only purpose of pot is to get high. That's the only reason you'd ever use it. So the very fact that somebody is using pot, they've already violated Ephesians 5:18. So keep control of your faculties and don't use pot. And I'll let you, based on what I've said, I'll let you decide whether legalizing pot is a good idea or a bad one. All right, we are in primary season. Got a big Arizona primary today. A Virginia candidate, by the way. Oklahoma's got one, and I think Florida's got a primary today. I didn't find that much interesting about those, so we'll let those take care of themselves. But here's a Virginia candidate who admits that he is a pedophile. He's running as a pedophile, as an open and admitted pedophile. He's running as an independent. He's not a member of a party. Can imagine that would happen. But this guy got sent to prison back in 2014 because he threatened the president. And here's what happened. We talked about this at the time. Governor McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia, remember, he restored voting rights to felons. He just pardoned a whole batch of them and restored voting rights, which includes the right to run for office. So this guy was out of commission, out of circulation, and I would think you threaten the president, threaten to kill the president, you ought to get more than just a slap on the hand. This guy still ought to be behind bars, but he's out there now running for office in Virginia. You probably saw the media dust-up over Donald Trump flying the flag at half-staff for just about one day. Now, one thing to note is he did it exactly the way that the law prescribes, no more and no less. But there was enough heat that he decided to fly the flag at half-staff up until John McCain is interred. But, Jeff and I were talking this morning about what kind of we learned from this huge obsession that the media has right now about what Donald Trump is doing. And Jeff, you made what I thought was a very, very profound observation. And I would, if Jeff wasn't in the room, I would steal this from him and I would pass it off as if I had tumbled to this brilliant observation. But Jeff, what observation did you make?
Just basically, it was just like this. Now all of a sudden, the media decided that we demand respect for the flag to honor a fallen veteran when they've spent the last 2 years glorifying the disrespect of the flag.
Yeah,
what a turnaround.
So the question is, where was all this enthusiasm on the part of the media that the flag be shown its proper respect, that it be honored in the way it ought to be honored, that it be used in the proper way to honor a fallen veteran? Well, that's what we do. That's what we do when we honor the flag before a football game. A lot of people do it. They stand in honor of those that have worn the uniform, have taken the risk. Some have paid, offered the last, full measure of their devotion, and we honor them for that. And the press is all against that. They want people to have the right to jump all over the flag. So outstanding observation by a member here of my own team. I had another deal. Speaking of Trump, there was a student in a high school that grabbed a MAGA hat off a fellow student, and he called it racist and hateful. He said the hat itself was a symbol of hate. It's a symbol of racism. Stole the hat off the top of the guy. Said the teacher tried to intervene, and the student was so energized, slapped the teacher in the face. So that student is now facing 2 counts of battery as well. That student should. Here is your catastrophic global warming alert for the day. Summer snow is blanketing Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. 4 to 8 inches of snow is falling on August the 27th and 28th in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. So there's your catastrophic global warming alert. They're digging out from under 4 to 8 inches of catastrophic global warming in those 3 states. And by the way, the climatistas, those that are advocates for non-existent global warming and CO2 as the culprit, 60 of the most prominent climatistas have agreed that they will not appear on the same media program with a climate science realist, with some scientists who is realistic about the science, knows that it shows no catastrophic global warming, knows that CO2 is plant food. These 60 are not even going to appear on the same program with them. That means we're getting to them. I mean, when they won't even debate you, that means they realize they've lost the argument before it even starts. One other point before we get to the end of this segment. Read a story on the pages of the London Guardian today that air pollution causes a huge reduction in intelligence. So if you're breathing the toxic air, and 95% of the world, I guess, breathes toxic air, you're out there, it will result in a huge reduction in intelligence, drops in test scores in language and arithmetic, the average impact equivalent to having lost a year of education. So just a heads up, if Jeff and I start to sound dumber on this program, you will know that we've been playing more golf, spending more time outside, breathing in toxic air.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, I told Jeff I wasn't going to pick on him today. So I'm picking on both of us. And that's another reason for me not to mow the lawn. Deb, I'm trying to stay smart. I got to be on top of my game. Be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. The New York Times wrote an extensive article on August 22nd entitled, quote, How the Trump Administration is Remaking the Courts, end quote. The article bemoans the fact that President Trump, keeping his promises to the American people, is nominating a record number of strict constructionist original intent judges to the federal court system at the district, appellate, and Supreme Court level. It is clear from the article that the New York Times loathes and detests this development because it is dismantling the liberal judicial imperium that has reigned over the American people for at least half a century. They complain, quote, in 2017, the Senate confirmed 12 of Trump's appeals court picks, the most for any president in his first year in office. This year, the Senate has already confirmed 12 appellate judges, and according to a Republican judiciary aide, hopes to confirm at least 4 more. The White House refers to every new batch of judicial nominees as, quote, waves. In early June, it announced the 15th wave of judicial nominees, as if they were soldiers landing on the beaches of Normandy, end quote. And the New York Times does point out that Mr. Trump's nominees, quote, have tended to be unusually well-credentialed, end quote. Their conclusion, in short, is that a radical new federal judiciary could be with us for a long time after Mr. Trump is gone. In other words, a judiciary where the majority will be judges who believe in the Constitution and who believe they should be umpires, calling balls and strikes, not changing the strike zone from the bench. And that is bad news for the New York Times. But it's good news for the rest of the nation. But isn't that most often the case these days? If the New York Times doesn't like it, it must be good for the country. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Howdy, and welcome back to the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Let's jump into a soundbite. This is Chuck Todd, clip number 1. And Chuck Todd is talking here about Donald Trump and Donald Trump's poll numbers. Let's take a listen.
As one of our pollsters, Peter Hart, put it, for the 2018 Democratic strategy, the Manafort and Cohen convictions represent a fool's gold opportunity rather than a silver bullet solution. By the way, in our poll, Democrats still hold a very big lead for control of Congress, 8 points now, 50-42. It's an improvement for Democrats from July when they had a 6-point lead, 49-43. So that's right, the president strengthened and congressional Democrats strengthened. Still, President Trump's strength in the face of a nightmare news week demonstrates that his voters remain far more loyal than his close associates do, some of whom turned on him this week.
So Chuck Todd admitting, and NBC is beside itself. They commissioned a poll along with Wall Street Journal that said that Trump's approval numbers are at 46%. All this dust blew up about the Manafort deal and Michael Cohen supposedly selling out on Trump and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of all of that, his poll numbers were still 44% approval. In other words, they cannot dent this guy, and it's driving them absolutely crazy. You want to know where all this media hysteria is coming from? The media hysteria is coming from the fact that the media is doing everything in their power to take him out, to destroy him, to diminish him, to neutralize him, and to get him out of office, and they can't even get to first base, cannot even get out of the batter's box. So it looks like Chuck Todd, they're finally starting to wake up to the fact that Donald Trump has an unbreakable, unshakable bond with his base. Last night, by the way, he hosted a dinner for 100 of the leading evangelical leaders in America. My boss, Tim Wildman, was there. Got a couple of pictures from the event, him shaking hands with Donald Trump. Another picture of, looks like Tim is giving Donald Trump a piece of his mind, some friendly advice. I love that picture. But anyway, this is Donald Trump, and inviting 100 evangelical leaders to come and meet with him in the White House. And then people wonder why the bond with his base is so strong that no matter what they do, they cannot dent it. Now, give you an example. This is MSNBC, clip number 2. They're talking basically about the same poll numbers. Let's listen to their take. Katie Tour and Jonathan Alter.
Last week was a tidal wave of bad news for this presidency, and this president and his approval ratings stayed the same. So I wonder, I mean, if that's not going to move the needle, is this John McCain thing going to move the needle? And forgive me for being skeptical, because I was under the impression, as was most people, that when Donald Trump came out and said he was not a war hero, he likes the guys that don't get caught, back in 2015, that people would care. And when I went out and I talked to Republican voters, they didn't care at all.
The Republicans don't care, but 43% is both a very high number when you realize that many people are so deluded as to believe this guy's a good president, but it's also a pretty low number.
So Jonathan Alter says the only reason that 44% of the American people still approve of Donald Trump is delusion. In other words, they're crazy. They're delusional. So that's their explanation. Can't be any rational basis for it. In fact, I saw today that consumer confidence is higher than any time it has been in the last 18 years. Who gets the credit for that? Donald Trump gets the credit for that. This is now his economy. And there's stories out there now about how the media censors conservatives, talking about Twitter, Facebook, Google. 96% of Google searches you put Trump in, it comes up with a website that is critical or hostile to Donald Trump. YouTube is shutting down conservative videos. Tech groups are even leaning on the SPLC for which groups to ban to identify hate groups. Liberal Twitter advisors, the ones who are advising people about what stuff to keep, what stuff to censor. Conservatives are being outnumbered 12-1 on those tech companies. So no wonder, and they think, man, we are flooding the zone here. We've got them completely outnumbered on all the tech sites. Google's trying to take them out. Twitter's trying to censor every conservative viewpoint. YouTube is trying to consider every conservative viewpoint. Twitter is shadow banning people. I've been shadow banned. Facebook disabled my ability to interact on Facebook for 24 hours. I was put in Facebook jail for 24 hours. So they're still trying to do this. But then another story comes out today where it turns out that what the FBI is doing is that they will leak secret information to the media, and then when the media writes a story based on their leaked information, they use that story to justify a FISA warrant. So they leaked it. It came from them. A journalist picks it up, turns it into a story, and then the FBI agents run to the FISA court and say, look, we've got this story out here that contains all these facts about what Donald Trump is doing. We got to get a FISA warrant to monitor him and his campaign. That's what happened with the Steele dossier. Michael Isikoff did a piece September 16 using stuff from that the FBI had leaked to him, and they turn around and use the Michael Isikoff story to support their request for a surveillance warrant. And we talked about this yesterday. Lanny Davis has said, look, I made a mistake when I said that my client told me that Donald Trump knew about that Trump Tower meeting in advance. That was a mistake. I cannot confirm that. Michael Cohen apparently has already testified that he did not know, that Trump did not know about that meeting in advance. So, and CNN, by the way, has still not retracted their story. They broke that story. Big scoop for them. Donald Trump knew ahead of time. Michael Cohen said so, and his attorney said so, and now it turns out that none of that is true. Every other outlet in the land has retracted that story. CNN still has not. It is still sitting up there on their website. Now, clip number 3, this is Mark Levin on the Sean Hannity program last night. And, the Democrats, a lot of them, the rank and file, have been talking about impeachment. The leaders, Eric Swalwell said we shouldn't lead with that. Nancy Pelosi says it's premature. Even had another Democrat saying we got to wait. Oh, that was what's his name, the Adam Schiff. We got to wait till all the evidence is in. So the leadership in the Democratic Party saying it's way too soon to talk about impeachment. But let's say they get around to it. Here's what Mark Levin says about the chances of impeachment as things stand today.
That's the headline, though. The president is in very good shape. You cannot impeach a president on events that occurred before he was president. I don't know if people are aware of this. The precedent is Vice President Collier's case in 1873. Judges, different. Presidents, vice presidents, on events that occurred beforehand. So even if they load up their phony list, we ought to keep that in mind.
You know, all this stuff, the whole thing with Paul Manafort, that was all before 2016. It had nothing to do with the campaign. The campaign hadn't even started when Paul Manafort was doing the stuff that got him in trouble. So there's absolutely nothing there. And Levin says, look, on impeachment, it has to do with stuff that you did while you were in office. Because Congress doesn't have any control over you with regard to what you did before you were in office. They don't have any authority to do anything to you. Well, before Donald Trump was in office, no matter what he did, it might even be illegal, but Congress couldn't touch that. That would be a matter for the courts to decide after Donald Trump left office. He could still be in trouble for that stuff, and he might still be in trouble for that stuff, but they cannot touch him for anything he did prior to being sworn into office in January of 2017. Constitution, they've got no authority to do it. So he's safe as far as impeachment is concerned. Most people don't want you to know that. And he mentioned here this vice president case in 1873. The vice president was a guy by the name of Schuyler Colfax, and he was credibly charged. He was vice president at the time for Ulysses S. Grant. He was credibly charged. In fact, it's probably true that he took bribes from the Union Pacific Railroad. Crédit Mobilier was the head company. Union Pacific Railroad was a subsidiary. They were trying to build that railroad across the country, and so they were putting money in the pockets of politicians so they could get a favorable vote. The oldest strategy in the book. And the Schuyler Colfax took some money from the United Pacific Railroad. And in 1868, he didn't become vice president until 1869. They said, well, we can't touch him because he wasn't vice president then. And what he did was before he became vice president. So we cannot touch him. So Donald Trump is exempt from any kind of impeachment based on anything that happened before he got sworn into office. And as the Constitution makes clear, he can get in legal trouble for things that he did while in office that may not be impeachment worthy, but may be criminal offenses after he leaves office. Then he's fair game like any other ordinary citizen. Now, we still got this effort to try to derail the Kavanaugh nomination. Here's Chuck Schumer, clip number 4. They haven't given up on this, trying to find some way to neutralize Brett Kavanaugh. And here is the latest tactic they're trying, Chuck Schumer.
A president identified as an unindicted co-conspirator of a federal crime, an accusation made not by a political enemy but by the closest of his own confidants, is on the verge of making a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court, a court that may someday soon determine the extent of the president's legal jeopardy. In my view, the Senate Judiciary Committee should immediately pause the consideration of the Kavanaugh nomination.
Now remember, you never heard Chuck Schumer saying this back when Bill Clinton nominated 2 justices to the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I forget the name of the other guy, maybe Stephen Breyer. I think it was Stephen Breyer. Nominated 2 people to the United States Supreme Court while the investigation into Bill Clinton, the Whitewater investigation, the Vince Foster investigation, and eventually the Monica Lewinsky investigation, while all of that was going on, and no Democrat said, no, we ought to hold off on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We ought to hold off on Stephen Breyer till we get past all of this investigative stuff. No, not a word. Very shallow, very thin. All right, we will be right back with more when we get back. You're listening to Focal Point on the American Family Radio Network. I'm Brian Fisher. Another man dressed as a woman wearing women's clothes went into a women's restroom and tried to take photographs underneath the dividing barrier. Got spotted. This is why we object to what Target's doing. We'll be right back.
So if we're Christians today, we walk around and we're wearing the holiness of Jesus. When God the Father looks at us, though we are sinful, He doesn't see us. He sees the clothes we wear, the holiness of the blessed Savior.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series, The God You May Not Know, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Imagine you're back to school shopping and your little girl comes running from the restroom in tears saying she saw a man in there. Sadly, scenes like this are playing out at Target stores across the country. Their policy is to allow men into women's restrooms and fitting areas. If some of us don't stand up and say this is wrong, what comes next? Protect your family and send Target a message by doing your back-to-school shopping elsewhere. Learn more and sign the Boycott Target Pledge at afa.net.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. Hurricane Harvey was the second worst disaster ever seen on American soil. 8 Days of Hope responded to that need in Houston, Texas, back in March, where 4,700 volunteers came from all over the world and all 50 states to love and serve people in need. When we left, we realized that there was still much more to do. So many people still were hurting, hundreds of thousands of families looking for somebody, anybody to help them. Here's your chance. 8 Days of Hope 16 will be back in Southeast Houston October 13th through October 20th. It's free. We provide the food and lodging. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who are semi-skilled, and people with no skills or less skilled and want to give back. For more information, you go to our website, 8daysofhope.com. We're expecting about 2,500 volunteers from all over America to go back to Houston to love and serve those in need. Hope to see you in Houston. 8daysofhope.com for more information. 8daysofhope.com.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. You know, talking about socialism for a second, which we weren't, but pretending that we were. Sometimes you gotta take some shortcuts when you're in the Daytona 500. You know, if you're behind a guy and he goes high, you go low. You go right underneath him, cut across the apron, and cut in front of him. That's what we're doing here. Anyway, Portland tried a socialist solution to the problem of homelessness. They said in 2015, it's October 2015, City of Portland said, we are just going to provide shelter for every single homeless family that asks for it. We're liberals. We're compassionate. We're going to do the right thing here. We're going to offer a home to every homeless family just if they want it. They provided $2 million, budgeted $2 million for this thing. And in 2017, the number of homeless people in Portland actually went down. But what was happening in the meantime, the word was spreading all across the United States through the grapevine. Hey, if you want a place where you can be homeless, you don't have to work a day in your life, and you'll get a free shelter from somebody, you can go to Portland. They'll give you, just ask for it. They're obligated themselves to give you free shelter, and you don't have to do anything for it. And so by the end of 2017, they just simply could not keep up with it. And again, that goes back to what we've said before. You get more of whatever you subsidize. You subsidize homelessness, you're going to get more homelessness. You subsidize poverty through welfare, what are you going to get? You're going to get more poverty. You subsidize illegitimacy by subsidizing women. Every time they have a child out of wedlock, you give them more money. What are you going to get? You're going to get more illegitimacy. And Portland was finally forced to bag that whole policy in October of this year. Socialism has never worked. anywhere it has been tried.
And Brian, I was thinking just for fun and just to make a point, I think we should donate 1 million how do you say it, Rob?
Bolivars.
Bolivars.
Yeah. 1 million Venezuelan bolivars to Alexandria Cortez's campaign.
And I agree. That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's the socialist, open socialist, calls herself a democratic socialist. Yeah. She's running for office in New York. And Jeff is suggesting that we all pool our resources and that we donate 1 million bolivars to her campaign.
Yeah. Yeah, why not? It would be worth
Okay, so we need to let people know if they want to help us. How much do we have to raise in order to do
maybe
this?
we should start a GoFundMe page. That would equal exactly 400 pennies.
All right.
$4.
So 1 million bolivars, you can get that for $4.
I think I got that on my change at my desk.
Yeah, we needed an actual I can't even say it. We need it in their currency to make the point, though.
Yeah.
That socialism does not work.
So all it takes to become a millionaire in the country of Venezuela is $4.
Yeah, the exchange rate is 0.000004 of theirs to $1.
And I know exactly what that would compute to, but I'm not going to bore you with that, so we'll just move on. So anyway, we've been following this thing down in South Africa where the plan was to expropriate, just to take farms from farmers based on the color of their skin. If their skin color was the wrong color, they had no protection from having their land taken from them. Well, they were on the verge of civil war. It was pretty grim. There were 1.5 farm attacks every single day. The farmers being attacked because of the color of their skin. One farmer was being killed in South Africa every 5 days. All of this down by the banks of the great green greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees. But good news is that bill has been pulled. So they're going to retract that bill and they're going to reconsider that. So the good news is for all those farmers that are down by the banks of the great green greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, they will be safe until that bill is reconsidered. Now, you know who else is fed up with illegal aliens? It is people in South America. Let me play a couple of clips on the death of Molly Tibbetts. This is Geraldo, clip number 9. Geraldo Rivera talking about the death of Molly Tibbetts, and he criticizes his own network for politicizing this thing. So here is Geraldo, who has never met an illegal immigrant he didn't fall in love with. Here's Geraldo on Fox, clip 9.
But what I was doing and what I am doing right now is begging people. I know that most of the Fox audience disagrees with me, but I'm begging you to have compassion and not brand this entire population by the deeds of this one person.
Geraldo, and that's what I was getting at with the attorney. The fact of the matter is that this person came here illegally. No one is saying that all 11 million people are capable of what this person's capable of, but put yourself in Molly Tibbetts' family's shoes right now. It's bad enough to learn that someone who was living and working in your neighborhood murdered your beautiful daughter. It's worse when you find out that they crossed the border illegally, that they're not even supposed to be in the country. There's a process for coming into the country. There's people waiting online from many countries who are going through the proper process. So the fact of the matter is that he shouldn't have been here. And that adds to their pain and it adds to how awful the situation is.
All right, so that's Shannon Bream showing a lot of logic and a lot of common sense. Geraldo Rivera showing no logic, no common sense. And again, that's all you have to do to be a liberal, which Geraldo Rivera is. All you have to do to be liberal is just feel. You just emote. And whatever you feel and the strength of your emotions, to you, it validates what you believe. It must be right because you feel it so intensely. You feel it so strongly. And that is no way to process life or make law, either one. Now, here is the second of two Geraldo Soundbites, clip number 10.
The fact of the matter is that he was here illegally. And for some people, that they look at that and they say, look, this is just another indicator. We have a terrible, lax process at our border. It doesn't work. And this person shouldn't have been here. He's not here legally.
We are putting that spin. We at this network are putting that spin on this story.
It's not spin, it's
this
a
is
fact.
a murder
It's a
story.
fact.
This is not an immigration story.
And she said, look, that's not spin. It's a fact. I mean, that's just an honest fact. You can't do anything about it. You can't pretend it's something else. Fact is, he was in this country illegally, and he killed Molly Tibbetts. That's just a simple fact. If he had not been in this country illegally, he wouldn't have killed Molly Tibbetts. He couldn't have done it. She would have been spared being knifed to death by this guy because he wouldn't have been anywhere near Iowa or near her as she went out for a jog. Now, let's see if we can wedge these in. There's a guy by the name of Seamus Bruner. He's written a new book called Compromised, and it's about how Mueller and Comey helped make each other rich. Let's listen, clip 5.
We're talking about the revolving door. It's a familiar story. Most Americans have heard of it. It's turning your public service into self-service. So here are the facts with James Comey. In 2005, he was worth just $206,000, modest income, modest net worth. He had a mortgage. Well, he goes to Lockheed Martin in 2005 as general counsel and also senior vice president. And by 2009, he's raked in millions of dollars, $6.1 million in that year alone. And just like you said, it's over 4,000% net worth increase. It's actually 4,250% using the most conservative estimates.
All right, so Comey, before Mueller went to work for whatever that company was he was talking about, I forget. Lockheed Martin. Well, they're the biggest contractor with the federal government. And so Comey is working for Lockheed Martin, doing something he'd never done in the corporate world, and Mueller's in charge of all of these government contracts. So he funnels them where? Funnels them to Lockheed Martin, so who can get the bonuses for all of that? James Comey. So Comey comes out of there as a rich guy worth $6.1 million that he got all in 1 year. All right, here is the second of the two clips from Seamus Bruner, clip 6.
I love capitalism. Capitalism is great. It's what makes America great. But this is not capitalism. This is crony capitalism. It's helping out your buddies. Robert Mueller and James Comey have known each other a very long time, going back to the late 90s. So, you know, a man like James Comey, he'd never run the general counsel's office of a corporation like Lockheed Martin.
Right.
And by the way, Lockheed Martin is the #1 contractor in America.
So Lockheed, Lockheed is saying to themselves, if we hire James Comey, we might just, get billions of dollars in government contracts because, Comey knows all the players, especially Bob Mueller. I mean, let me play devil's advocate for just a second. Would it even be possible or conceivable for Mueller to say, oh, gee, I didn't know anything about that $1 billion that went to my pal's company?
No, Robert Mueller, as FBI director, would absolutely have to sign off on a $1 billion contract award. And also, there are multiple contracts that go to Lockheed Martin while James Comey is the general counsel from Robert Mueller's FBI. And Robert Mueller announces them and celebrates the fact that Lockheed Martin won the award.
All right, so there's one soundbite we don't have time for. Maybe we'll save it for tomorrow. But the point that Seamus Bruner is making here is that Comey and Mueller worked as a tag team to make money off of public service. There's no longer public service. It was entirely self-service. They're good buddies. So when Mueller was in the FBI, he'd send contracts to whoever Comey was working for. When Comey was running the FBI, he would direct contracts and money to whoever it was that Mueller was working for. So it was incestuous, and it was turning public service into a gravy train. Well, that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Do not forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap, and never forget we are fighting a winnable war. God bless you. See you back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hello, this is Dr. Ronnie Floyd, president of the National Day of Prayer Task Force. The Apostle Paul wrote that we should